First national poll of 2018, packed with data here on the Emerson College Polling Weekly podcast. Professor Kimball, what do you got for us?
Well, we're into the first year of the Trump administration, so we thought it would be a good idea to look back, see where his approval rating is, take a look at his policies, and kind of start to forecast what 2018 is going to look like, particularly amongst message strategies and potentially 2020 candidates. So let's begin with his approval rating. We have it now down to 39%, which is down from his 44%, which was at about 3 months ago. And then about a year ago, it was up around 48%, 47% in our polls. So we've seen his favorability kind of drop over the year. But then we asked a question if voters were willing to change their vote. And we took a look at the 2016 Trump voters and the 2016 Clinton voters. And what we found there was about 14% of voters said that they were willing to change their vote. However, 12% of Trump voters and about 10% of Clinton voters. But those voters were actually, Trump was getting about 24% and Clinton was getting about 20% of that subset of folks. So there wasn't a clear indication that anybody was truly upset with their candidate, Trump or Clinton, that they would actually, have huge movements. But interestingly, they did shift a little bit more towards Trump. So that's kind of the general area of Trump. I know that there's big issues today on his physical status. Friday he had his doctor's visit. So we asked a question about his mental stability. And it was interesting to see that about 43% said that he was mentally stable, but on the flip side, 46% said he was mentally unstable. So I think that kind of goes into that partisan divide where we continue to see those who like him continue to like him. They think he's mentally stable, but 46% thinking that you're mentally unstable is sort of high, in my opinion. You expect to see a little bit more strength than his stability amongst voters, but with that, we start looking at some of his policies that he's looked into. And one of the big policies, obviously, we've talked about over the last couple of weeks is his marijuana policy with Jeff Sessions, looking to either legalize or criminalize the legalization of marijuana in some of these states. So we asked the question, giving him really 4 options: one to legalize it for recreational, one to legalize it for medicinal, one to keep it totally illegal, and one was for unsure. And voters were split between the medicinal and the legalization and the recreational. About 20% wanted marijuana to be totally illegal, but 43% said that they liked recreational marijuana for adults over 21. 38% said that they wanted really medicinal purposes.
Yeah, I said it here in this space on this podcast that it is just amazing that marijuana, which was once a fringe topic when it was ever discussed in political realms, be it on local, let alone national level, almost never on national level. And here it is at the absolute forefront of these 2018 midterms and even at the executive branch. What really do you make of that in terms of that data feedback there with marijuana?
Well, in the marijuana, if the pro-marijuana groups really want to get it legalized through the incremental process, they continue going through the medical and then take it to the legal. If they ask, the states, would you want it medical? It looks like majorities would want it to be medical. But then when we get to the legal, it gets a little grayer, though it looks like if you were asked just between legal and illegal, it would still lean towards the legality in recreational use. And we saw Cory Booker actually make a play on this last week. He sent out an email when Sessions came out. And Booker is one of those candidates who is looking to run in the Democratic primary. At least people suspect that he's looking for the Democratic nomination. So we took a look at that 2020 field, and we had 9 candidates in there. And he gets about...
We're interested.
Yeah, he gets about 3% of the vote. He's down in the area of Kristen Gillibrand, Kamala Harris, Jason Kander, lesser-known names within the Democratic field. The candidates that really rise to the top are Bernie Sanders at 23%, Joe Biden at 27%. So about half the voters are breaking between these two older white men, which is interesting within the Democratic primary where there's traditionally more diversity of candidacy. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, obviously, in the next about 6 months, because then candidates are going to start going for 2020 in January as soon as the the midterms are over.
Yeah, I didn't hear Elizabeth Warren's name in there.
Warren is actually in that second tier, kind of on her own. She's at about 9%. Oh. So you got the two men up at the top in the mid-20s, and then she's at 9%, and then everybody else is under 3%.
What other issues you see here in 2018, big midterm year? Sanctuary cities, that was a beta test run the Republicans used as a campaign message during the off-election year, especially the gubernatorial races. What do you got there?
Well, you see, these are interesting issues. The marijuana issue, it's actually favored, the legalization is favored by Democrats. It's opposed by Republicans. So now we get to sanctuary cities. Overall, sanctuary cities is opposed 47 to 35. But once we start looking at like Democratic primary voters, they support sanctuary cities, 51-30. Republicans oppose it, 62-36. Independents oppose it, 51-28. So now you got these Democratic candidates whose base of voters want sanctuary cities, yet the general population doesn't. If they go tack to the left and go to this base, would that poison the well for them in a general election matchup where people are initially opposed to this policy? So either the Democrats will have to do a better job of convincing independents and the general population that sanctuary cities is a good option, or they'll just not be able to play it in the during the primaries. But obviously, if it's a large field, some candidate will try to take the mantle and try to make it an issue.
Here's a hot question issue. We teased it last week, and it is a holiday, Martin Luther King Day. I know you asked some questions about race relations. What'd you find there?
Well, obviously on MLK Day, our hats off to MLK and all the leadership of the civil rights movement. And so we wanted to know how people were seeing race relations in the country. Obviously, during the Obama administration, there was the shootings. There was the issue in Cambridge, at the beginning of his administration. So there's been racial tensions, obviously longer than just the Obama years. But we were hoping that Obama would kind of heal some of those wounds. Currently, it looks like about 15% of voters think that things have improved in the last year. 51% say things have worsened. So it's nearly 3-1 where people think that race relations are going in the wrong direction, except for Hispanic voters. Interestingly, this group, not the white voters or the African-American voters or the Asian voters, it was the Hispanic voters that found that race relations had improved for them 35% to 33%. So while that number is within the poll's margin of error, it's still statistically different than the other ethnic groups which saw race relations going in the wrong direction. So it'll be an interesting subset to look at, particularly as Hispanics become a larger portion of the population. And as we look at elections in Florida, Arizona, Nevada, even parts of California, even in Illinois, these groups are going to make a big impact in the race. And so their attitudes about how things are going will be very important to monitor.